Welcome to Picture This, Tampa Bay's only call-in talk show devoted exclusively to photography. Hosted by Jeff Donald and myself, Lou Donald. And tonight we have a special guest, Jeff.
Yeah, we do. In the studio tonight is friend and professional photographer Jason Collins. Jason, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So we'll get a little bit of the business out of the way, and Jason, we'll put you in the hot seat. It's terrible. It's brutal. 60 Minutes has nothing on us with the questions we ask professional photographers. So, but if you've got a question for Jason, call us at 727-441-3000. Toll free, you can reach us at 866-826-1340. Or email us your questions, and the email address is picturethis.questions@gmail.com. And we've already got a listener or two that has emailed us, so we'll get to those this evening in short order. Lou, we've got a couple of regular features coming up. I know you've got your website of the week.
Yep.
Anything special? What are we in for this week?
Well, another photographer that I came across that I particularly appreciated what he was doing and thought it was pretty inspiring, by the name of Mark Geistwhite,
Yep.
who is based in Bakersfield, California. So a lot of scenes is primarily landscape scenery. A lot of stuff from California, very, very nice. Not hard to find. Just Mark G. photography.com, and he has his gallery set up by season. He photographs all year round scenery and some really nice stuff. Don't get confused, there is a Mark G photo, which nothing against that particular gentleman, some interesting stuff, does a lot of products and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you do want to make sure you click on Mark G Photography if you want to see that particular website.
Cool. Sounds interesting, and I'll get the links posted on our Facebook page and those kind of things, so the listeners can check that out. Last week, I foregoed the This Week in Photography History segment, so this week I kind of have two.
Wow, great.
Wow, two, yeah, count them. The first is, this is marking the anniversary of the birth of Richard Avedon, one of the most influential photographers of the 20th century. He was born May 15th, 1923, and he was born in New York City. His folks had a clothing business, so as a young child, he was greatly influenced in the fashion industry. At age 12, he joined the Young Men's Hebrew Association Camera Club.
Wow.
I'm not sure what the abbreviation for that would be, but went on to the rest of his life. From the age of 12, he was really consumed by his passion for photography. Shot a number of notable celebrities through the 50s, 60s, 70s. Pictures of Bob Dylan, Audrey Hepburn, Marilyn Monroe. I mean, it's like a who's who. And some of his stuff was some of the most avant-garde, stylistic type work of the 60s and 70s. So this marked his birthday. Would have been his, let me go back to do the math. Should have got my calculator out. In 23, this would have been his 90th birthday this past week. So Richard Avedon. The other is an interesting one, and actually was kind of a childhood hero of mine. I don't know that you ever knew this, Lou, but I thought I would grow up to be a mountain climber. And,
I know who this is going to be.
Probably, but it was 50 years ago, coming up, May 22nd, that the first American ascent of Mount Everest. And, of course, that was the pinnacle in rock climbing. So as a little kid, I mean, I followed this on the stories on National Geographic and in the paper and all this stuff. And there was a National Geographic photographer, Barry Bishop, who was on the second team. And he summited the mountain on May 22nd. 1963. And there were actually 4 Americans from 2 different routes that summited the mountain the same day. And that was kind of the end of it, and on and on and on. But as things changed, when I owned my video production company, little did I know at that time, Barry Bishop had retired, but he had gone to the University of Cincinnati. And in 1994 or 95, I'd have to really think about it, he did the commencement address, which was about this time of year for the University of Cincinnati. He was an engineering student and things. And so I actually got to meet him. I was videoing some things for the admissions department for that, and got to meet Barry Bishop and those kind of things. The sad part of it is, a few months later, he died in an automobile accident in Idaho. So that was quite an honor to be able to meet him. But it was 50 years ago this week that he was one of the first Americans to climb Mount Everest, which at that time wasn't. That was a huge deal because of the efforts and the technology at the time. So, but Barry Bishop was the official National Geographic photographer on that expedition.
Wow.
Yeah. And his pictures are still around. If you Google it, you'll find them. So, that's my 2 segments tonight. And we have a guest in the audience, or they're not in the audience, but in the studio. And we've got Jason Collin, who we were talking before the show. You and I have known each other, we figured, 4 years now.
4 years, yes.
Yeah. And so you're a professional photographer here in Pinellas County, St. Pete, but you're throughout the greater Tampa Bay area, aren't you?
Yes. I live in St. Petersburg, and most of my work is kind of towards South Pinellas and based around the St. Petersburg area. But I've done photography jobs all around the area, probably as far east as Haines City.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're getting around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was for a triathlon.
Yeah. And as far west as, like, Japan and Korea, really?
Yeah. My first paying job was in Tokyo, actually.
Really?
So, yeah.
So what did you have to do for your first paying job?
First one was it was photographing a dance event, a dancing event, kind of like a professional dancers event.
Oh, wow.
First doing there was it was a school, I guess, actually. They had all their classes were having their big annual competition. So it was first doing group shots of 5 to 12 people of all the dancers in their costumes and stuff. And then photographing the students and the teachers dancing in competition after that.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so that paid, and that got you hooked. So was that in the film or the digital era?
Digital, yeah. All my photography's pretty much been in the digital era.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good thing. You might go broke otherwise.
Yeah.
So that was how many years ago?
That was in 2008. That first paying job was in 2008.
Now, I've seen some stuff of yours from Tokyo long before that.
I started in digital photography in 2001.
Okay.
So my archives go back reliably back to about 2001. And before that, my film days were quite limited, but I did travel from Florida to California and have some 5x7s printed somewhere.
Oh, cool. So are you actually from Florida?
Most of my life, but I was born in Rhode Island.
Oh, okay. All right. But raised here or what have you?
Yeah. It's been long enough that most of my...
You consider yourself a Floridian?
I guess I would say, yeah. If I had to, when I lived abroad, I said my home was in Florida. So,
there you go.
Yeah.
That'll commit you.
No, yeah.
So what kind of gear did you shoot your first assignment with?
That was with a Nikon D80.
Oh, yeah?
And I believe at that time I might have had only the Nikkor 18 to 200 millimeter lens.
Yeah.
No, I take that back. I had sold it before then.
Yeah.
I had bought the Nikon D80 in probably August 2008.
Right.
And, not knowing too much, I got the 18 to 200 millimeter Nikkor lens, first gen lens. And just as a hobbyist, just walking around shooting within 2 months, I was dissatisfied with the results from it. So I sold that lens. There's a really easy to sell and buy used lenses in Tokyo.
Yeah, that's like the camera store mecca of the world, just about. We think of B&H in New York, but camera stores in Tokyo are something else.
Just to tell you a little story, from less than a 15-minute walk from my apartment in Tokyo were 3 dedicated camera shops the size of a Best Buy.
Yeah.
So, and I walk by them from the train station every day. So you can get hands-on with every piece of gear made by every manufacturer. Basically, you can, it's just a big advantage of being able to get, hands-on and try stuff out. And Nikon's headquarters was also within that range too, up on the 44th floor of a skyscraper where they have everything. You can go and they give you free cleanings and stuff like that. So it was
pretty impressive.
Yeah. When I moved back here, I assumed it would be similar.
Whoa.
Yeah. I didn't think there'd be, so many stores, but I assumed there'd be, several in the Tampa Bay area.
The Tampa Bay area.
Quite a bit of a shock, right? From going,
Yeah. And truthfully, when you moved back here in 2008, there were even more stores. I mean, now we're literally down to basically 2 stores in the Best Buys. Yeah. And you've got Office Depots and Staples, but that's really not where I think too many people shop for their gear. So, it's no wonder B&H and Adorama and these places have the market share they do here in Florida.
You think there'd be some market for that now, though, with so many people having DSLRs and, probably wanting to expand their own ecosystem of, accessories. It'd be nice to have, some stores where you can get hands-on and just don't have to go by reviews and things like that.
I would say the closest store that's pretty decent around here, you'd have to go to Orlando. Okay. I mean, I don't mean to take away from the 2 local stores. Right. But Colonial Camera's got a much wider selection. But, because of the tourism there, they've really got a larger market that they can cater to. Mm-hmm. So that sounds exciting that you were in Tokyo for that amount of time.
Yeah, it's a good place to launch a photography interest or a photography career because there's so much to photograph that's of interest, especially to a visitor, to an expat living there.
Right.
I could literally just walk downstairs and have all kinds of subjects just coming by. There are parades all the time, festivals.
Oh, really?
They're very into the seasonal events and things like that. And just for street photography, I think it might be the best city in the world as far as having subject matter of interest and the added benefit of it being the safest big city in the world. So you don't really worry about walking around with your gear at any time of night and anywhere in the city.
Yeah.
And of course, if you know about Harajuku and all the cosplay people out there, so you have all kinds of subject matter and stuff. And
very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, at some point, you were you married when you were in Japan?
No, not really.
Okay. Not really. Okay, then. Just checking.
Yeah.
So, moving on. So, you went from Japan to Korea? Is that right, or was it reverse?
It's reverse.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I recommend the same path as well, going from Korea, then go to Japan. I was in residential areas in Korea, though I did get my first digital camera in Korea back in 2001, going up to Seoul. They have a big, digital town up there. And it was a Olympus 2040 EZ, 2.1 megapixel.
Yeah, I remember that camera.
Very good camera. I liked it a lot. 2.8 lens. As far as you can say that for a fixed lens camera, and it served me well traveling around Southeast Asia for a number of years.
Yeah, Olympus had a huge market share at that time.
Right.
They really had some of the most innovative point and shoots, bridge cameras in the market at that time. They were struggling with their DSLRs, but that a lot of people, that was the first digital
camera form. Sure.
Because you had an early Olympus at that time, didn't you, Lou?
I had an E10 and then an E20.
Yeah.
Which was a bigger SLR.
Right.
But the lens didn't come off.
Right.
It was the equivalent of 35 to 135.
That sounds right.
2.8 to 3.5, something like that, 3.2. So it was a nice fast lens.
Yeah.
Served me very well, 4 and 5 megapixel cameras.
Yeah. That was the classic era of digital, I guess
we'd
call it today. Yeah, that's what it was. So you moved back here 2007, 2008, somewhere
2009 February.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Was that when it was?
Yeah.
Okay. And we met probably just a few months after that.
Yeah, not too long after coming.
And so you start taking pictures here in Tampa.
Yeah, at that time, I didn't, of of course, know all that I know now and stuff like that. So I was, still learning quite a bit at that time. And, I didn't even shoot in manual mode, even going back to 2009. Didn't shoot in RAW. Was using iPhoto only for editing photos and stuff like that. So.
Also, you're a Mac guy.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Since 2005.
All right. Yeah. Well, that wins you points.
Though I am kind of disappointed with a lot of the things they've done in the past 2 years, software-wise. But other than that, yeah.
But other than that, yeah, we won't talk about that right now.
Right. So yeah, when I came back, I met Jeff and went to some of the meetup groups, quite a few of the meetup groups, and then other meetup groups.
Yeah.
And just was learning stuff, picking up stuff. And at that time, I wasn't thinking about doing it full time or anything like that. But as things turned out, the following year, I pretty much made the decision to
jump into
pursue photography full time because the economy it's not great now, and it was even worse
then.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was basically a matter of deciding I need to make my own job, or at least give that a try and stuff. And basically, that's how I got started becoming a full time photographer.
And that's not uncommon. You're not the first photographer to sit in that chair. Okay. Who has basically said the same thing to us that I went out on a limb and I decided to pursue my passion, and we've had emails that have come in, not tonight, but I mean with some of the other photographers, where people are like, ask them how we got started. Well, it's like, and I think they're expecting some. Well, I studied all these courses. I worked for 20 years and apprenticed with some guy, and so now I'm a professional. Mm-hmm. And in many respects, it's following a dream, following a passion.
Right.
But the times that I've shot with you, I mean, you're a pretty savvy shooter. You've got a good eye, and you understand a lot of the technical aspects of it now really well. So whether it's part of your personality or your training, you've picked a lot of things up.
I think it's part of my personality. I have an engineering background.
Oh, okay.
And numbers and math, are always, I like to think about, things in terms like that, and so that part of it, was easy to pick up, and for me to make the transition to shooting full time wasn't much of a financial investment because I already had all the gear. Basically, when I came from Tokyo, I had already upgraded all my stuff through the used market there. So when I arrived back here, I pretty much had a sufficient amount of gear where it didn't cost, I didn't spend much extra, and I already had the computer and software to kind of do the stuff. So if you don't have to worry about that initial financial investment, then it's just jumping in and crossing your fingers. Yeah. Right?
The worst thing that'll happen is I'll be homeless, but I'll have some really cool camera equipment.
Yes.
Well.
Yeah. Well.
A lot of people feel that they want to kind of put a label on a photographer. He's a this kind of photographer, or he's a that kind of photographer. Is there anything that you specialize in or particularly enjoy, or how would you describe yourself?
I've transitioned, quite a bit from that time in 2010 where I started doing photography full time and only photography as my source of income. At that time, it was just, maybe how a lot of people start out doing portraits and weddings, just because a lot of the meetup groups, people seem to do that and stuff. So I competed in that market for about a year until I got a pretty important business consultation through the Chamber of Commerce down in St. Pete. And after talking with that person, it just became apparent that I wanted to transition to more commercial photography, and photographing in those markets, because also in my mind, again with the economy, I felt like businesses still had money, whereas doing the lifestyle stuff, you're dealing with private people essentially,
right?
And you can always get undercut on price, and I'm not one of those. I didn't want to compete on price and stuff like that because I had a value in my mind for what I wanted to get paid. And
absolutely,
like that. So now on my business card it says commercial photography, events, cars, and teaching photography lessons, actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, if I had my way, I would photograph cars, almost exclusively, because I like cars just personally, and I like to photograph them as well. Events I find exciting. Basically, it's also a thing where I'm kind of, maybe you could say, a one-day type of photographer. I like to get a photography job, go in there, shoot it, and then almost have everything edited within 1 or 2 days after that, or if not the next day, and then move on to the next job.
Yeah.
Where lifestyle photography and stuff, if your personality suits that, and you're transitioning through weeks of time with people, especially for weddings, right? That's a long thing, and then choosing the photos, et cetera, proofing galleries and whatnot. So I found I liked the kind of commercial end of go in, make just a couple shots, get that job finished, and then next job.
Yeah. So what have been some of your more, say, interesting or challenging assignments?
In 2011, I had a call out of the blue from the U.S. Department of Labor.
Okay.
That at the time, U.S. Secretary of Labor Hilda Solis, she's no longer.
Right.
She was coming to the Tampa area, and they needed somebody to photograph her going to some meet and greets and events in the Tampa area. So that was probably my most interesting and high-profile photography job. And I got a good insight of what it's, a day in the life of a politician.
Sure.
I'll bet.
Hectic.
And that looks nice on the resume, too, when you got somebody that's high-profile like that.
Right.
Secretary of Labor, blah, blah, blah. Very cool.
Other than that, I've had opportunity to photograph the Commodores and John Cicada through photographing an event in St. Petersburg, Florida. And since I've transitioned to commercial photography, I've had a chance to work for two of the bigger car auctions. If there's car fans, you might have seen Meekum Auctions is on TV on the Velocity channel pretty much every week. And I also did a photo shoot for RM Auctions.
Oh,
Yeah. Got to do a 1974 Jaguar shoot for that and stuff. So it was cool to work for them, things I've seen on TV before.
Yeah. And automobiles continue to be one of your favorites, doesn't it?
Yeah, as much as possible. And I go to the local car shows and stuff like that. I'm trying to work on making more contacts through that, and I'm working with a new client now, so hopefully I'll be photographing his collection and just trying to meet people who have collections. And part of that also stems from my own car history. My first car was 1979 Ford Mustang.
Oh, there you go.
4-cylinder, nothing crazy, because I bought it myself and I had to pay for the insurance myself. This is back, in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And I love that car more than, I don't know, pretty much anything I've ever met, outside of, maybe a person and then my dog, right? And I had no photographs of that car, because just in 1992, people didn't walk around with, cameras all the time. And of course, there were no cell phones and that kind of stuff, right? So actually, just when I went home for Christmas, visiting my mom this past Christmas, she found an old photo.
My!
So it was like
that's cool.
It was like gold.
Yeah.
But that originally inspired me to offer car photography, because I'm thinking there's got to be nowadays it's maybe not so much the case, but just to not have a photograph of something that was so important to your life, a teenager's first car. So that's part of the reason why I like to do car photography as well. So
you've got a website. Let's get that out there.
Okay.
Before I probably should have asked that earlier. You've got a website.
Yeah. JasonCollinPhotography.com, just my name. And I have quite a bit of content on there. I add about 3 to 5 blog posts every week.
You do?
Yeah.
And is that how they can get on your mailing list?
Yeah, you can. I do send out a weekly photography newsletter. You can subscribe to that through the blog section.
Okay.
There's a place where you can enter your email address, or you could contact me just through the contact page on the website, and I can add your email address to that. Almost every photography job I do, I put a blog post up about how it went, what it's like, how I, what I needed to do to make the shot, or if there's anything interesting or some quirk or something new that I learned about, from that shoot.
Sure.
And then just, some other personal things that I shoot during the week that I like to put up there, and I put a new photography tip up on the blog every week as well.
Yeah, which, we were talking before the show, and I said, I'm on a lot of people's emails,
right.
And yours is one of the handful that I look forward to getting that email every week, because you're welcome. You've earned it. You're a hardworking journeyman in this industry now. You don't do $10,000 weddings, but that's not your shtick, so to speak.
Yeah.
But you're working in there day in, day out, and really making it happen. And I really like your email. You've done a great job. It's very informative every week, illustrated with some great photographs. So even if you're an experienced photographer, getting a chance to see some of your photographs is a real treat, because I see your freshest stuff, the stuff that you're doing, most currently, not something you did 4 years ago.
Correct.
It's always fresh and vibrant and good kind of work. So what kind of editing programs are you using today?
My workflow is pretty established now, and I haven't changed it much in maybe the past year and a half.
Yeah.
I start with Aperture 3.
Okay.
Lightroom's rival program it's a Mac-only program.
Yeah.
I start with that, importing the raw files directly into Aperture 3, and then I do some basic adjustments in there. And then one of the secrets to my editing is I really like Color Effects Pro.
Okay.
Made by Nick Software, which has been bought by Google now.
Yeah.
So I've used, when I discovered Color Effects Pro 3, 4 is the current version. So I've used it actually with a student, and I kind of like 3 better still.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Can't get that anymore.
So I use some, if you're not familiar with it, it's a plugin actually. It has a bunch of filters in it that, if you're not a Photoshop expert, you can really do some. And one, hint is, or one tip I could say is the polarizing filter in Color Effects Pro 3 is great. I think Lou and I were talking about what filters are actually still useful to photographers now, right? And a polarizing filter is, still kind of one, but that polarizing software filter in Color Effects Pro is a secret to a lot of my editing.
Very cool.
And after that, I send the photos for some heavy lifting into Photoshop.
Right. Very good. Very good. You're using all the Adobe stuff.
Yeah.
Have except for Aperture, of course,
right.
But I think a lot of the viewers are. What's maybe you don't have an opinion at all, but your take on the recent Adobe stuff with everything going to be web subscription?
Subscription, yeah.
Creative Cloud.
Right. I mean, it's easy to understand why they would make the decision as the company, and as far as earning their revenues and stuff. And basically, I think the main sticking point is once you decide to stop paying, you don't have that software on your computer anymore, or you don't have a functioning version anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So you could pay in for several years and then be left with nothing.
Right.
Where I'm sure a lot of people, individual photographers like myself and hobbyists and stuff like that don't upgrade all the time each year and stuff. Like I myself am using CS5, and I saw no reason to go up to CS6 at this time, and I think that's just going to cost them more money, and just you always have to be nervous if you stop that subscription. So it'll be interesting to see how it actually plays out and if they actually how they implement it.
Yeah, it's controversial. It's but I think your comments are very level-headed.
Right.
Do you have any favorite photographers?
Yeah, I mean, when I started out, like you said, I didn't go to any photography school or anything like that. Largely, self-taught, I consider. But I followed a lot of photographers, and I listened to a lot of photography podcasts, especially when I was in Japan, because you commute by train and stuff like that. There's a lot of downtime to listen to things. So I really get into following Scott Bourne.
Oh, yeah.
He has a number of sites. At that time, he was with This Week in Photo. But
TWIP or whatever.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now he's with Photo Focus, and he has a podcast for pros, actually going pro and stuff.
Right.
So I adopted a lot of his photography philosophies. If you don't know him, he's kind of a bold and somewhat brash photographer and stuff. And
he makes a name for himself.
Yeah. And he's had success, and he has he's photographed a lot of different things, and I really liked how he gave back a lot through his websites. And also, one of his friends and stuff was Rick Salmon.
Oh, yeah.
I followed him a lot to, learn. He has a lot of sayings that are very easy to remember and very good to implement when you're out shooting. So, and I got a chance to meet him through he was in Oldsmar, I think, maybe a year or two ago.
Yeah.
So I got a chance to meet him in person. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, Rick's one of the Canon explorers of light. He gets paid by Canon, or not paid, but expenses covered and some things like that. It's not like he's making it rich off that kind of thing. But both of those guys would certainly be great photographers to emulate, and you can certainly learn a lot from either or both of them. Those are both great photographers.
We're looking at photos on kind of a daily basis. I like to follow Thomas Hawk.
Oh yeah.
And I follow him through his Google Plus stream because he posts, I think, at least one a day, and a large variety, often abstract type photographs. So I like to look at his photographs. And I still follow a couple photographers, one that I met personally in Japan. Alfie Goodrich. He's a commercial photographer out there. Yeah, I don't think either of them are quite famous enough to make it over there, but he's one of the more popular photographers over there, and got a chance to meet him once, and he gave me some tips. And
shoot me a link to him sometime.
Sure. And Martin Bailey, who maybe
I know that name. Yeah.
He's probably most famous for shooting in cold weather. He goes in Japan and Hokkaido, the northern parts. He has probably some of the. If you've seen photographs of monkeys in the hot springs,
with the Dos Equis man, isn't that him with the Dos Equis man coming out of the?
Right.
That's I think Teresa's favorite commercial.
And Martin recently went to Antarctica and just posted a series of photographs from Antarctica, and that's some of the best landscape photography I've seen in a while, or just some wow images from that. So
very cool. You have any follow-up? I got one last question, unless you've got something, Lou, and we'll move on. No? So we ask this of all of our guests.
Sure.
What do you carry in your camera bag?
All right. Some aging photography gear.
You can fit my brother in your bag? That's amazing. I mean, he's like the most aging photo gear I know.
Yeah. I still shoot with a Nikon D300.
Yeah.
I have a Nikon D80 as a second body.
Backup body.
And I still have my lenses that I traded up for back in Tokyo, a Nikkor 8200 f2.8.
Oh, sure. Fast lens.
Serviced me, and
Yep.
You believe it or not, I got that for $600 back in 2008. And my workhorse lens is a Tamron 17 to 50 millimeter f2.8. That other than a few physical things blemish on it, it's been working tried and true for several years. Cost benefit value for that lens over Nikon or Canon, the OEM brand for that millimeter, and f2.8 was a no-brainer for me at the time.
Right.
I have a Nikor's 105 millimeter micro.
Oh, the micro Nikkor.
The macro one,
that's a classic lens.
That lens is really sharp and has a really creamy bokeh. I like that lens a lot, not just for macro photography. I like to use it for portraits, and just abstract. It's just a fun lens to use.
Cool.
I've got a 50 millimeter lens, of course, and I use speed lights. I mostly use 2 speed lights, and since I changed over to a black rapid strap a couple years ago, it made me more excited to go out and shoot actually a little bit, because it's just a comfortable camera strap.
Yeah, it is.
And stuff.
Yeah. I never thought I'd like sling straps. And,
right. Yeah.
I finally, like you, a couple of years ago. Well, it's not the Black Rapid. It's called a Sun Sniper.
Okay.
But very, very similar. And can't say it revolutionized my shooting, but it's a whole lot more comfortable. Yeah.
Shooting, I used
pleasure.
When you shoot 4 or 5 hour events, I noticed the difference from that. My shoulder and neck, and my neck wasn't tired at all, and my shoulder wasn't really that tired.
You weren't in traction the next day, in other words. All right, Jason, hey, thanks for being on the show. We're going to welcome you to stick around as long as you want. We're going to transition to our topic tonight, which is what, Lou? What are we going to talk about for the next half hour?
Different types of photography and what lenses or equipment you might need or want to consider to be very important for that type of photography.
Sure. So what kind of photography are we talking about here?
Well, let's just, to make it easy.
Oh, easy. Okay.
Let's just start off with macro photography.
Okay.
And pretty obviously, the first question is, or answer is, some kind of a macro lens is the first thing that's going to come to mind.
Yeah.
But there's advantages with different kinds.
Sure. So, Jason, you just told us you have a macro lens in your bag.
The Nikon's 105 millimeter macro lens, and I like that lens a lot. It's long, the 60 millimeter macro lenses, unless you're working inside with objects, if you're out in the field, I think, you kind of want to have at least 100 millimeter focal length, I think, for a macro lens.
Yeah, and you're using it on a crop body, so you're actually around 150 or thereabouts, for that angle of view. And that's a nice compression and everything for portraiture and things like that. I like those longer lenses. I carry a 60 macro in my bag merely because it's economical. One of these days I'm going to break down by the Canon 100 macro. But what I find myself using is my 70 to 200 2.8. because the macro things I shoot, years ago I used to shoot small stuff. I mean, little tiny flowers, this kind of thing. But now I'm more into like butterflies, dragonflies. I mean, this is Florida. We got more of that stuff than you're going to find almost anywhere. And I can fill the frame with a 70-200. And that's the issue. I need to be far enough back that I don't scare my subject away.
Working distance.
Yeah, I need that working distance. And, there's some things you can add to those lenses. I sometimes add a teleconverter to it, which gives me a little more magnification. And if I was really serious, I would probably add one of the Canon, or there's some other brands, the 2-element screw-on diopters or filters. Not the single element, but the dual element. Canon makes them.
What was that? Marumi?
Marumi makes one, but they're $100 to $150, something like that.
Yeah, they're going to be a little more expensive, but give you much better results than the little $40 kit.
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3 diopters.
Yeah, those are kind of abysmal. Save your money almost, but it does give you a flavor for it. I mean, it'll give you an idea if you really got the patience and some of that stuff.
If you really like to do it, you spend a little bit, try it out, see if you enjoy it, and you may get something that's fairly decent, but at some point you're going to want to upgrade. At least to the 2-element or a teleconverter, something that's going to give you better results. Least expensive new macro lenses are probably about $250 today, $250 to $300. And then you're in that 50, 60. Canon still makes a cheap 50. I think
50. Yeah, and it's a full frame 50, whereas their 60s EFS lens, so it only works on the crops. And Nikon's got a macro, I think that's crop sensor DX lens only.
60 millimeter.
Is it? Yeah, same as the Canon. Yeah. And those are about $350, $360. They're very competitive, I think.
Now, what it's hard to find is somebody that's making a macro which is more than that 100, 105.
Right.
Sigma just came out with a 180.
Yeah.
I used to have a Nikkor 200, which I loved.
Yeah.
That was a famous lens.
And it was manual focus.
Right.
And but that was the era for a while. But there's still a lot of people, autofocus and macro still don't make a lot of sense in a lot of cases.
You end up turning it off anyhow.
Should we say that something about expectations with macro too? Because when I bought my macro lens, I thought I was going to walk out and just get one of those shots where you can see different segments of an insect's eye. And stuff like that. And, that doesn't happen in the field, right?
Those are almost studio shots, very manipulated,
drugged or deceased insects and stuff. So it's amazing what a little bit of time in the freezer will do.
Oh really slows you down. All right. So, but long macros are great, but there's not many people making them. That's why I use my 70
They're expensive, and they have other uses, but we're spoiled by zooms these days to the point where we go, a 180, 2.8, what do I want that for? Well,
back in the day.
Yeah. There's certainly other types of photography. Portrait photography.
Sure.
What comes to mind?
Well, it really depends on your vision there. I know people that do full-length stuff, and they do them with fairly wide-angle lenses because it's, and they're out at the beach. They've got some abstract thing in the foreground, and there's this woman in a flowing, wedding gown at the beach. So it's a little different. And they're shooting them with, 15 millimeters, 18 millimeters, something like that, all the way to my stuff. I actually don't mind shooting. Now, this would be full frame, but I used to use for a lot of head and shoulder stuff, I'd use a 300 millimeter lens because it had that nice compression to it. Right. And there was a guy, Brian Lankard, did the whole swimsuit issue for Sports Illustrated one time with a 300 millimeter lens. He must have used a megahorn to talk to the model or something, but whatever. So I tend to see things more
with the longer lenses.
With the longer lenses, I don't do much wide stuff for portraiture, unless it's a group shot or something.
No, Although, I mean, the traditional portrait lens, is somewhere around that 100 millimeter, 80 to 135 was the traditional lens, which gives a little more compression, can still be pretty fast. Typically, they were fixed focal lengths, and when I talk to guys that do a lot of portraits, they're quite often fixed focal length, 1.4, 1.8.
85 millimeter.
Yeah, 85. Well, they want that real shallow depth of field.
Yeah.
And the Canon made that 50 f1.
Yeah, well,
and that's since they discontinued it, the price of that thing's gone up. It's just under $4,000 on the used market. But I mean, razor thin depth of field, and it's got lens issues, but still, if that's the look you're after, I guess you need that lens.
Yeah.
And
then there's some interesting lenses. Remember the Canon used to have that 135 soft focus lens?
Oh yeah. That's still in the product line. It's a 135-2.8, and it introduces spherical aberration.
Yeah.
It defocuses, so you can run this ring, and it works like a regular 135-2.8, but you can dial in spherical aberration, and the lens gets softer. And it's really a unique softness. It's not your normal softness. And there is a guy, he's doing, I'll have to give him to you for photographer of the week sometime. He shoots, I think he's Australian, and he's done a lot of African portraiture stuff of animals that you can't imagine. And they have this really unique look, and he doesn't say what he does, but through some investigation, I kind of figured it out. He's shooting film, one of these big giant Pentax 6x7 that looks like a giant SLR, and Pentax was the only medium, format company that made one of those soft focus lenses, and because he swears he doesn't do it in Photoshop, and that's it. You can tell by the look of it how unique that is.
Does the effect look a little bit like a tilt shift lens, or different than that?
It's just how things are out of focus.
Okay.
It's not your just depth of field out of focus. It's introducing a physical element to it. This what's called spherical aberration, how the light actually separates and doesn't come to focus. It's really interesting. But I'm gonna dig that guy up. We'll maybe I'll try to get him on the show sometime.
There we go.
We'll Skype with him. So I'm looking something up here. So what's next on the list, Lou? While I anxiously look up something that Anthony texted.
Well, I think something that is often very important to a lot of our listeners. We've got a lot of people that get into, shooting wildlife here in Florida, birds, things like that.
Yeah.
Very popular.
Sure.
And there the first thing that comes to mind is you go telephoto lens.
Sure.
But then it becomes which one, what's effective, what can I afford, various issues come in rather than just, okay, here's my $10,000 and here we go.
Yeah, well, that'll get you started.
Yeah, that'll do.
600 millimeters, might as well start there and work your way back.
Unless it's, 600. Yeah, for $10,000, you could probably get a used one. But and it really depends where you're going to shoot the wildlife.
Yeah.
Because Florida, we're somewhat blessed. The animals are habituated. They're used to the people. They typically let you get closer. And the birds are bigger. I mean, not all of them, obviously, but we shoot a lot of pelicans, herons, egrets, ibises, which are larger birds. And you go out into the west, go out to Yellowstone, Montana, Wyoming. The distances are immense, and these hawks and things like that, they're not used to seeing people, and you stop within 100 yards of them, boom.
They're gone. And
a lot of times it's because they're persecuted out there. Hunters, while they may not supposed to do it, they still try to shoot them and everything else. So, there's lots of things that come into play there as far as where you're shooting. But even so, with all that said, I've never had a bird photographer say, "Oh, that's way too much lens. I'm getting way too close to my subject. Can I have something shorter? You got something in a wide angle that I can use?" I don't know who you would be that would say that. So, in my opinion, there's a couple ways to go, but I think for most people in Florida, you've got to have a lens that will at least hit 400 millimeters. And
now, are you talking full frame or crop?
Well, ideally crop, but
yeah, a 400 millimeter on a crop camera.
Yeah, so now you're talking out to 600 or a little more, and then now there's some ways around that, but a 300 with a 1.4 teleconverter, that'll get you out to 420. We were talking before the show, the Nikkor 80 to 400, the Canon 100 to 400 are both top choices. If you can't afford that, and you don't want to go to the used market, which is still going to be $1,000, maybe a little less for either one of those, then you're into the Sigmas, pretty much. They make some 50 to 500s and 150 to 400s, and some different things that are in that $1,000 range or under. But truthfully, I've never been impressed with any of the image quality on those Sigmas. Yeah, it's sad, but true.
I had one photo student who was planning a trip to Alaska, and the cheapest way and the one less expensive way of getting the 600 millimeters that she went with was a 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 with a 2x teleconverter.
Yeah,
which I had used before, borrowed from somebody, but she got the second gen of that, and it was a Nikkor lens, 70 to 200 millimeter second generation.
Well, that's a $2,500 lens.
Yeah, and the second generation teleconverter.
Yeah,
and we used that at f2.8, and it was sharp.
Yeah,
only a D90 at that time, so I was pretty impressed. It's still not that cheap, but then you can use the 70 to 200, and it's a solution you can handhold fairly easily too.
Yeah,
because you have to think about that, right? Am I going to be in a place where I can use a monopod or a tripod if I need to wield something, especially if you're not a larger person. Yeah,
well, and that's something that I was a big proponent of when Canon came out with their second generation 70-200. I own that lens, and I've got the Canon 1.4 and the 2X. And typically speaking, until that lens came along, if everything were perfect, you could get decent shots. But the second gen Canon 70 to 200 took things to an entirely new level, just like Nikon's did. And that is a workable combination. Maybe not for everybody,
right.
But Arthur Morris uses that, who, in my opinion, is one of the greatest living bird photographers today. And so, if it's good enough for Artie, maybe I can live with it too.
Right.
So
yeah.
And the other genre that falls right in there is, for a lot of people, sports photography.
Right.
The difference between sports photography and bird photography or wildlife is not immense. You're a lot of times working in lower light levels, ball games at night, and even pro games. The lights aren't the best. Nature photographers, sunrise, sunset, you need those faster lenses, the 2.8s and stuff, and that 70-200 plays right in there. You look at the 400 5.6, that's two stops. That's two stops of ISO, or it's 20 minutes you're shooting before the guy next to you is until the sun comes up enough that he can
start to shoot.
Yeah, because you got a two-stop advantage. That's huge.
One quick story I could pass on. I was photographing a marathon out at Fort DeSoto, and I was shooting with another person. And as I said before, I have the 80 to 200 Nikon lens, f2.8. They're second generation of that lens.
Right.
And the person I was shooting with had the first generation, and she couldn't even get her exposures weren't using the exact same settings and we actually had the same camera. But just that difference in lens, she couldn't get a shot that wasn't just basically all black, where I could get a workable shot at ISO 800 only.
Yeah.
So it's, generations in lenses are really.
One of our listeners, Anthony, who I know, good guy. He's a Nikon shooter, just like you. Lives over in Lakeland. He texted me to clear up misinformation. We were talking about that Nikkor 200 millimeter. They do make an autofocus version of that lens. on the B&H site I'm looking, it says temporarily out of stock, and you can click the notify me. As long as you have that $1,400 burning a hole in your pocket, B&H and Adorama, and these guys will hook you up.
Yeah.
So
it's really a cool lens.
Yeah, I was always a big fan of the manual focus. You want to take a peek? That's even a cool looking lens. Anthony, you need to get one so we can shoot with it. He's got some of the most amazing lenses. He shoots with both Canon and Nikon.
Okay.
And good photographer. He's got a great. He posts a lot of stuff on Facebook. What's next? I mean, there's other types of wildlife, but really, the one lens you got to have is a long lens. I think we all settled on that.
Yeah. Well, and then of course the other typical type of photography that a lot of people are interested in is landscapes, scenery, and sort of what can go along with that is cityscapes as well as landscapes.
Sure.
And the first thing that comes to mind is often a wide angle. But, I've seen some nice stuff done with normal length lenses, 50 millimeters. I've seen stuff done with telephotos. It's kind of wide open based on your vision, I think.
Sure. Well, and I mean, that's a wide open topic. And it really does, like you said, it depends on your vision. Landscape stuff that I do, when I travel out to Yellowstone and do these things, or when I lived out west, the wider the better as far as I was concerned. And Teresa and I have a Canon 10 to 22, and I shoot it a lot of times at 10. And but the lens that I think that I would replace it with is Sigma, and it's a crop sensor lens, DX lens for the Nikon folks. Is a Sigma, and I'm not a big fan on Sigma, but they make an 8 to 16 millimeter, which would be the equivalent of, like on a Nikon, a 12 millimeter lens. That is pretty wide.
Yep.
So I think if I were to, for my vision, I would go as wide as I could on a crop, and I would get that Sigma 8 to 16 millimeters. And I actually had a chance to shoot one. One of our members rented one, and we went to that Florida Christian College in Lakeland, where a lot of the buildings were designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and they have this cool fountain there that the college spent a ton of money to restore. And oh wow, that's all I can say. Wow, 8 millimeters. That's right up my alley.
Oh, I always liked something really wide like that.
Yeah.
But I have seen some really nice stuff with longer lenses, which seem to work. I think a lot of that is your own vision.
Yeah.
Don't limit yourself shooting scenery saying I don't have a wide enough lens.
Yeah.
Be creative, and you can still do some great stuff.
Oh yeah.
Depends on your landscape subject, right?
Right.
For me personally, one of my favorite landscape shots that I've made was using a 200 millimeter focal length, because I was at the top of a mountain and I photographed the top of Mount Fuji.
Yeah.
If you had a wide angle lens, it would be the size of your So zooming in, you could kind of fill the frame with that too. So it depends where you are. I mean, in Florida, we're kind of cramped, right? So wide angle works pretty well, but out west.
Well, and a lot of people don't know how to shoot with a wide angle. They just think, the wider I can go, the more stuff I can get in, and more stuff doesn't make it better. What I found for my vision, my style of shooting, is I need an anchor, something up close that kind of, really roots the picture. And then now you've got this thing fairly close to the lens, and then this really wide perspective, people go, wow. So, because it gives the picture a sense of scale.
Right.
If you don't have that anchor, that foreground object, it doesn't really mean much. So wide-angle lenses are not easy to shoot with.
Right.
And, we need to point that out. But, yeah, effective landscapes can be telephotos. One of our members, George, who lives up in Crystal River, he's got one of those gigapans where it shoots a whole series. And he's done some stuff. We need to get George on the show sometime. but because he's got more wacko gear and stuff than just about anybody. But he's done Tampa skyline stuff, and he shot it with like an 80 to 200 at 200 millimeters, and then he uses a Mac, and he has to stitch together like 90 plus images. It is amazing. But I mean that does that does landscapes, wide angles, whatever you want to call it. But we would be remiss to not talk about the Nikkor 14 to 24.
Yeah,
that's in my book probably the greatest wide angle zoom lens ever made. It's almost enough for me to switch. Almost, Jason, this close.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
And an old standby, which I've shot many times from different manufacturers. I just always loved 15 millimeter lenses.
Yeah. Zeiss, I had a guy I shot with in Cincinnati. He was one of the camera store owners. He had a Zeiss 15, and we were out shooting flowers one morning. This was in Cincinnati. That was in Ohio. Ohio, Jace. That's a little inside joke that he made a crack about Ohio, not knowing Lou and I were both born and raised there. But
it's okay. We forgive you.
Yeah. You're from Florida. We really forgive you. No, Rhode Island, another great state. But anyway, so we were out taking macro pictures, and he whips on the Zeiss 15. I think it was a 2.8 or a 3.5 probably, and so he got some dewdrops on the front of the lens, and this was in film, so that's pretty wide angle. The dewdrops were in focus, so the actual front of the lens is in
sharp.
focus. It's sharp. That thing had so much depth of field.
Yeah.
And it was early in the morning. He was probably shooting it at 3.5 or 4, and you don't need to focus that.
Yeah.
Which actually brings about some of the lenses I'm really and I know you laugh at me, but Bauer, Samyang, and all this Korean lens company making manual focus lenses to work on the crop sensors, full frames. And they're very modestly priced, but you give up autofocus.
Yeah.
They make a 14 millimeter 2.8 that is amazing. If you want to try it, and it's under $400.
Yeah.
They just brought out a 24 millimeter tilt shift, and you want to talk about what I call urban landscapes, streetscapes. Tilt shift lenses are very cool, and that lens is brand new. $1,000, and would be very easy to shoot manual focus because of the depth of field and those kind of things.
You really those lenses need to be manual focus.
Yeah. Well, tilt shift lenses are anyway, and Anthony, so you can double check me on this. Find me a tilt shift lens that's autofocus, and I'll.
I actually used for a job recently earlier this year Canon's 14 millimeter tilt shift lens. I rented that for the client and to shoot some stuff, and that's a fun and challenging lens to use.
It is. I borrowed one from Canon when I went out west a couple of years ago. Part of their Canon professional services, they allow you to borrow stuff, so that was real cool. And I borrowed that lens. It's actually a 17, I think. Canon doesn't.
Is it? Okay,
yeah. If it's a tilt shift, it was a 17, which is the widest tilt shift made.
Yes.
Very cool lens.
Yeah.
Teresa says, hey, that's pretty neat. We get back from Yellowstone. That's a pretty neat lens. I like some of that stuff you did.
Yeah, right.
What does one of those cost? I was like, "Ooh, you don't want to know." Oh, how much? About $2,500. Ah! She was okay. We'll put that on the list. Yeah, right. But wonderful lens.
Oh, yeah.
And I back in the film era, I had a couple of tilt shifts for my Olympus system, and I miss them. So I might just have to add that Samyang 24 millimeter to the bag, so to speak. So beyond that, where are we at?
Well, to be honest, do we have
we got another minute or so.
Another minute or two.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions that we didn't get to?
Oh, we did. We've had a question, and you probably have some input on this too. Sue B, who is a regular listener, she emails almost every week. Such, she wants to know if we have any photography magazines that we recommend, something that we read or can pick up at a library, whatever. And her concern is that she's probably picked up a couple, and she says, are they all so full of advertising? So, Lou, I know you've got some strong opinions on this.
That I particularly like and have picked up primarily at Barnes & Noble these days. They're both from the UK. One is called Advanced Photographer, and the other one is called Practical Photography.
Right.
They're a little more money,
right?
A lot less ads, and unlike what you find mostly on the newsstand around here, a lot more how to do certain things.
Right.
If you're looking at equipment, I find their tests to be somewhat more in-depth, but primarily how to do different kinds of things.
Right.
Although, as we talked a little bit before the show started, if you're really trying to learn things, I might suggest at Barnes & Noble in the photography section, sometimes you can find books about a particular type of photography.
Sure.
And sometimes you can find a general, okay, I'm kind of starting from scratch. Here's the basics. There's several good authors of those.
Right.
Which I can highly recommend rather than completely depending on magazines for how-to.
Right.
And those kinds of books often become a nice reference to look things up, refresh yourself if you're going out trying to do something different.
Right. Yeah, I've got, the only magazine that I still routinely take a look at is Outdoor Photographer. Yeah. I do look at Shutterbug from time to time, but not too often. I think those English ones you mentioned, I think there's even a... like an online, if you've got an iPad or a tablet, you can actually subscribe to them or purchase them, in the app, so to speak, and get them that way. But I do like your idea of books. But even going beyond that, coming up this week, we've got a free trial with lynda.com.
Right.
And lynda.com,
all online.
They do stuff on cameras. You can learn your camera, learn different types of photography, etc. So you might check out something like that with our 7-day free look coming up. I think it starts Wednesday. Jason, thanks for being with us. It's been a great show.
It's been fun.
And we'll have you back here in a few months. Lou, I think we're headed to O'Keefe's tonight. Is that right?
I think that's the case.
All right. Anyone want to join us at O'Keefe's? You're welcome. We're downtown Clearwater. For Lou Donald and Jason Collin, this is Jeff Donald saying good night, and we'll see you back here next week. Take care.